Well, hello everybody. My name is Susie Calder and I'm your webinar host today. Thank you so much for joining me. Welcome to our first ever Spark Somerset webinar, and also my first ever webinar that I'm running. I've been on plenty, but this is the first one I'm running. So please bear with us while we learn, and please be nice. Please do say hello in the chat so that I know you can hear me and see my screen. So slides that I'm going to use in today's webinar, we will be sending out by email to you all afterwards, and also there's a handout that will come out by email as well. So you don't need to take notes of things that are on the screen particularly. Hello to everybody, it's lovely to see you all. So far we've got nearly 40 people on the webinar, so there is a Q&A box, so that's for questions that you have, and so if you've got any specific questions rather than general comments, please do put them in the Q&A box, and I will try and address those all at the end, so that it's got a bit of structure to it for the webinar. So the whole situation with Covid-19 is really new. We're all a bit making it up as we go along in terms of systems and support being put in place. And every community in Somerset is different. So you're all going to be doing things a bit differently, but there's still a lot that is common between us and we can still learn from each other. So today is a real whistle-stop tour through some of the things around coordinating a Covid-19 response in your local community. It's not going to be massively in depth. I'm going to do my very best to keep to an hour. And so it is a short webinar. I've tried really hard to make it interactive. And we've got a survey at the end of the webinar for you to tell us which topics you'd like us to do in more depth. So like I say, today is not about depth, it's about sort of covering lots of topics as much as possible. There are some Zoom controls, so we're using Zoom as our webinar host. There's some controls at the bottom of your screen. You are muted and your cameras are off. We've got now over 40 people in the group in the webinar today, so having everybody talking would just be unmanageable. So that's why I'm asking you to use the Q&A box at the bottom. So there are a couple of times where I might ask you to raise your hand when I ask some yes or no questions. There's going to be some on-screen polls, and like I say, there's the Q&A box. So let's get started with a poll, which is very exciting. First ever poll I've done. So here is a poll. If you could all answer that, that would be fantastic. So how are you involved in your current local community response to the pandemic? Just trying to get a feel of who is here today and what, you know, the kinds of things that people will be hoping to get out of it today. So particularly I'm interested in those people who are already organising groups or wanting to start up groups. I'm interested in what kind of balance we've got in the webinar between those two groups of people. Obviously, you might fall outside of one of those options. I'm really sorry. Okay, so we've got, not everybody's voted just yet, so I'm going to leave it just another few seconds for people to vote if you've not voted already. But over 30 people have voted already. So if I give it another few seconds or so for people to fill in the poll. Yeah, so I'm aware that there's a couple of people from local councils who want to support groups, but not necessarily be involved in the actual group itself. So I'm aware that you guys are there. So hi to the councils. So just give it a few more seconds. Okay, I'm going to do a 10-second countdown and then I will close the poll. Okay, if you can't see the poll, if you can let me know, because everybody else has managed to see it. You should see it straight in your screen. There's 2 people who can't see it. I don't really know why that is, because over 30 people have managed to vote, so it should just be on your screen in front of you. So Amelia has suggested that you might need to take your view off 100% at the top under your view options on the Zoom screen. I'll just give a few more minutes. I do love technology issues in the middle of something. So make sure you're not in full screen mode is the suggestion coming in. There we go. So 64% of you, oh no, 66% of you have managed to vote so far. I'll just give you another minute while people try and figure out the controls. So if you've got your webinar maximized to the full screen, you may not see the poll. So you'll need to resize it, I believe is the issue. So you don't want to be in full screen mode. Normally to come out of full screen mode, you would press the escape button. Hopefully that's helping. Okay. I'm really sorry if you can't get the poll to work. I'm going to move on because otherwise we're going to be here all day with the polling. So I'm going to shut the poll now. Okay. So I'm just going to share you the results of the poll. As you can see, most of you here are involved directly in organising and coordinating a group. There are a small number of you who want to start up a group in your community. So, and there's a good number of people who are volunteers as well. So that's fantastic. So what I'm going today's webinar is predominantly going to be aimed at that large group, so people who are already organising and coordinating a group, but actually it's really, really relevant to people who want to start up a group in their community, and to volunteers as well. It kind of gives you a real kind of overview of how things are either working at the moment or some of the things to think about before you get started. Okay, so brilliant. Thank you ever so much. So I shall take that off the screen. Hopefully that's now disappeared. Okay, brilliant. So lots of the COVID-19 groups have set up very quickly by people who are really, really keen to support their community, and that's absolutely fantastic. What we're hearing is that actually some of those people may not have done anything like this before, but actually not many people have done something like this before. The pandemic has created a situation that not many people have had to deal with before. So we have seen people setting up community activity very quickly, mobilising lots of volunteers very quickly, and actually feeling under huge pressure because there are lots of people in need or asking for things. So responding to a pandemic is not a usual thing. It's easy to feel overwhelmed, and there's lots to think about and do. So really this webinar is a part in trying to make that a little bit easier. For Spark Somerset, it's not our role to tell you what to do, but it is our role to provide guidance and support. And I hope that's what this webinar will do in part. There are other ways to get support, particularly from us, and I'm going to talk about those in a bit. So what is the title of the webinar is around, the best way to coordinate the response to the pandemic. And actually, what is the best way to do things? Well, there is no single best way to do things, but there are some key ways that can help. So I've put those on bullet points on the slide in front of you. When I talk about being as local as possible and small is beautiful, our experience is that often in a community we want to have a full overview of what's going on, but where we've got larger communities, that makes it really difficult to organise things down to a street level. So some of our larger communities are finding that, yes, they started up with one group, but they're actually having to break that group up into smaller areas. So being as local as possible means that it's actually much more easy to get volunteers in place, know what's going on, and things like that. And indeed, I was talking to somebody in Hammersmith earlier in the week, and their experience was exactly the same as ours in that regard. Although they cover a much more urban area, they originally thought that they would deliver everything from a borough kind of coordination, but actually what they've now done is break it down into neighbourhoods and streets, and that has become so much more manageable, particularly for the volunteers involved. I suggest that you involve as many local people and local organisations as possible, and that will again help you break it down into local areas. If you can be really clear about what you're going to do, you'll find that organising it becomes easier. And what we're seeing is that most local groups are kind of keeping to 4 main activities. So there's shopping and delivering food, prescriptions, dog walking, and befriending. They seem to be the 4 main activities. There are others, but those are the 4 main activities. So the kind of support that we can offer as an organisation is we already are running a Facebook group, coordinators group. It's a closed group, so if you're not already in that, do come along and join us, and it's an opportunity to share what you're doing and learn from each other. We have got a COVID-19 webpage on our website. The link for that is on that slide, and obviously when you get the slides later, you'll be able to click directly onto that. We're going to be running some more webinars. Like I say, they'll be more topic-based and more detailed. And then we do work one-to-one with groups. So if you have a particular issue, do contact us, and we can either talk you through or offer some other support. It's really important that you remember that the situation is changing rapidly. I'm sure you're hugely aware of that. So we're keeping up to date is really important. And our webpage, we do keep that resource as up to date as possible. So the Facebook group is called, I think it's called the Somerset COVID-19 Group Coordinators Network. I know that's a massively snappy title, but if you follow us on Facebook, we have got a link to that on our Facebook page. So that should be easier to find, hopefully. So some common questions before we get into the nitty-gritty. So we're really aware that some COVID-19 support groups are concerned about whether they can continue to operate under the latest lockdown restrictions. So volunteers can continue to support vulnerable people in their communities, but they must ensure they follow the latest government guidance and minimise the time that they spend outdoors. Volunteering that requires going out of the house is now only permitted in certain circumstances. So if you are well and not at risk from coronavirus, you can undertake essential activities, including delivering food, helping people with their medical needs, such as picking up prescriptions, providing essential care or help to a vulnerable person or persons. And that includes things like food banks, homelessness services, and blood donation as well. We've been asked some questions about signposting people, so how do we signpost people? When do we signpost people? So we would generally say that local community groups can serve a really wide range of people, but people who are very vulnerable and have multiple needs should really be signposted to Somerset Direct. So that's Somerset County Council, and the number for them is on the screen there. Again, you'll get that with the slides. So yeah, particularly where somebody is at risk and requires support that's really beyond the scope that you're providing, please do contact Somerset Direct or get them to contact Somerset Direct to ensure they receive the right care and support. We're going to be well, we are in partnership with Somerset County Council and the NHS putting together a referral guidance. So you'll that'll be coming out in the next day or so. Unfortunately, it's not ready in time for today's webinar, but it will be coming out very soon. So we will again, we'll put that out on our COVID-19 page, but also in our coordinators group, Facebook group. My apologies if you can hear my dogs barking in the background. Working from home has a number of pitfalls, and my idiot dogs are part of that, so my apologies for that. Okay, so I just wanted to pick up some quick questions around the differences between self-isolating and shielding. So shielding is really about the most vulnerable people in terms of the coronavirus. So people are being asked to shield if they are very vulnerable to the coronavirus, and shielding is being away from any risk of infection from the virus. So staying indoors completely, not having contact with others, even in the same home, and for around 12 weeks, they're saying at the moment. People who should be shielding include those on chemotherapy, have had organ transplants, and have got comorbidities. There are some other classes as well. Most people who should be shielding should have had a letter from the NHS advising them to shield and how to do that. And those people who are shielding, that's what the NHS Volunteer Responders Scheme is set up to support. And so shielding is quite different from self-isolating. So people are self-isolating for a variety of reasons. Self-isolating means that you are staying at home and keeping out of general contact with people. And that might be because you've got symptoms of the virus. That might be because you might be slightly vulnerable to the virus. And so people who are self-isolating generally are people with certain health conditions, such as asthma, COPD, things like that. And those who are over, I think it's over 65 or over 70, I'm not entirely sure of that. But again, the advice is on our webpage. Well, there's a link on our webpage to the government advice, and so as that changes, that will be updated there. We've had some questions about the local hubs. I'm going to come back to that at the beginning. And then we've had some questions about funding. So most of the local COVID-19 groups that have set up don't have a formal organisation. It's a fairly loose collective of people. Some of them have got organisations involved, so they've got their local town councils involved, and other local charities, well-established organisations. So it's a real mix. So it's really hard to say whether a group can get funding or not. If you've got established organisations involved, then getting funding might be easier. If you're a loose collective of people, then getting funding to do various things might be more tricky. If you've got particular issues or things that you want to get funding for, do come and contact us, and we can talk to you directly about how we can support you to do that. So I've got, again, some questions about the shielding criteria. So the shielding criteria is available from our webpage, our COVID-19 webpage. So if you want to go direct to the horse's mouth, please do that. Okay. So let's talk about safeguarding. So for those of you who don't know what safeguarding is about protecting vulnerable people. And what we mean by vulnerable people is quite broad. So what we want to do with safeguarding is we want to safeguard the people that we are offering service to. We want to safeguard our volunteers. We want to safeguard the reputation of your community scheme, because without a reputation, people aren't going to want to use it. So it's really important. And so there's lots and lots of things around safeguarding. And I know that lots of organisations or groups have got a little bit concerned about the wide variety of issues that are popping up around this. What I'm really pleased to be able to tell you is that from this morning, the Independent Safeguarding Service is offering free training for you and your volunteers. The information is now live on our COVID-19 page. The It's all online, so I think they're 2-hour sessions, so people can do it from the comfort of their own home, and that should give you some reassurance that your volunteers understand what safeguarding is and how to carry it out well. So safeguarding is really, a lot of it is about putting systems in place to protect people, and so you need to think about how you can protect, like I say, the people you're giving your service to, but also your volunteers. And so we've been asked a lot of questions around ID checks for volunteers and DBS for volunteers. So what I want to show you just now is, we'll come back to this slide in just a moment, is this piece of advice from the National Council for Voluntary Organisations. So again, you'll get this whole slide short when we email the slides out later. What's really key from here is that there's been some real confusion around whether all volunteers should be DBS because shielding makes you vulnerable and things like that. So self-isolating or shielding doesn't necessarily make somebody vulnerable. That's the key point to take away from this. A DBS can only be granted where you're doing regulated activity. If you're not doing regulated activity, then the DBS check is not mandatory. What's really useful to know about the volunteering stuff at the moment is that there's a really great example out there already. So the NHS Volunteer Responders Scheme, volunteers within that are only being DBS'd, or DBS'd, I'm not sure that's an actual word, but you know what I mean, where they are driving people around, so that kind of patient transfer type of role. And they are delivering prescriptions, picking up, shopping, befriending. So it's quite clear that DBSs are not necessarily necessary. So the NCVO are advising that you need to think about the purpose of the role that the volunteer is doing. And the purpose of the role generally is going to be doing a service because somebody is self-isolating. You're not doing the service because they are vulnerable in terms of the definition that DBS use. If you think that your volunteers should be being DBS'd, again, I'm not sure it's a real word, but you know what I mean, or you're not certain, please do come and talk to us. So we do run a DBS check service as an organisation, and we do have the ability to do some free DBS checks for COVID-19 groups. But there is some limited scale to that. It's not a first come, first serve type thing, so don't panic. But please do contact us at Spark if you would like to access the DBS service. So a good question just come in is, do volunteers need to be DBS checked if they are dealing with money? There's a whole section that I'm going to do on handling money in a bit. So I think if you can wait till then, I'll address the money stuff later, because we're aware that that's probably one of the issues that's giving people most anxiety is around handling money. Okay, so let me just go back to the first slide around safeguarding. Again, so we've had questions about ID checks as well. So an ID check is quite different from a DBS. A DBS is the disclosure and barring service, and it checks whether somebody has got a criminal conviction or is on the barred lists. An ID check is quite different. An ID check is you as a group looking at somebody's identification and keeping copies of it so that you have an audit trail. You can verify that that person is who they are, it is who they are saying they are, and that should something happen, you have an audit trail to go back to. Some groups are finding that to reassure their volunteers and reassure their service users, that they are issuing letters of authority. A letter of authority or a letter of authorization isn't mandatory, but they can be quite useful. So we do know of some instances where people are being stopped by police and are being asked why they are out of their home. And so having a letter or some sort of ID saying that you're a volunteer of a particular scheme can be reassuring to volunteers. It can make that process a bit easier, but they're not mandatory, and some groups are just finding that they can get on without them. There's some things that you need to think about that. So, what does that letter prove? Is it easily copyable? Those kinds of things. Excuse me. And I just wanted to kind of go on to the who to refer concerns to. If you've got safeguarding concerns about somebody, you are worried about somebody that's either a volunteer or a household or somebody in a household because of the contact that you've had with them, then you really should be calling Somerset Direct on the number that's on the screen. If you're concerned that somebody's immediate danger, you think their life is in danger, then you should be calling the police immediately on 999. And that's not to panic people. You shouldn't need to use that very often at all, but we do feel that it's important that you at least have that in place for your volunteers, so they know that they have got somewhere to refer people on to. I say there is more information about regulated activity and DBSs on our website and also via our DBS service. So I'm going to move on for those because obviously we're nearly halfway through our time and I don't want to kind of take too much up on each issue. Like I say, whistle stop tour for today. Handling money, yay! So before we get on to the actual handling money stuff today, what I thought we would do is see what people are already doing in their groups. Again, so if you're not a member of the group, or you're not involved in coordinating one, then you might not know. And I'm sure that not all of the options are on this list, but it'd be really great if you could answer the questions. So it answered the question, sorry. So this is me. Your answers are all anonymous, by the way. I don't get to see how you've answered this. I'm just interested in what the current arrangements people are using. And at the moment, there's a few people going, we are still trying to figure it out. And that's absolutely fine. What we know is that there's lots of different solutions out there, and none of the solutions are perfect. It takes some organising, some of them. And like I say, I'm really interested to know what people are currently doing. So we're just going to give the poll a few minutes to go. So less than half of you have voted so far. Excuse me. Okay, so about 30 of you have answered the question so far. I guess that some of you are still not able to access the polls. I'm really sorry about that. And I think we've got a couple of people saying that they don't touch money at all. So that makes life a lot easier, I suspect. Brilliant. Okay, I'm going to give another, so let's 10 seconds or so to for people to answer the poll, and then I'll share the results so you can all see how that's looking. Okay, right, I'm going to end the polling now, and there's the polling ended. Any second it'll let me share the results with you. Okay, so as you can see that there's quite a few people still trying to figure out how to handle money. Like I say, we know that it's probably the issue that people think is the trickiest one to deal with at the moment. There's a very small number of people who've got a float for volunteers. Some people have got a local arrangement with shops to pay by phone. The vast majority of people who've answered the poll have said that their volunteers are paying up front and then getting reimbursed when they deliver it. And then there's a significant number who've got a different arrangement. So we know that there are some interesting arrangements out there, and that there are some groups who've purchased card readers, so they're able to take payments from people at the door, or they can do it over the phone in the shop. So there are a variety of issues out there. So let me just stop sharing that. What I want to do now is just share something with you. Bear with me while I battle my technology. So on your screen, you should now see a document. So this is the handout that we're going to send to you after their webinar's over. It's still being updated, and so it will be on our COVID-19 page as well. So I'm not going to take you through them all right now, but there are 10 different options on this document, and at the moment you can only see 2 of them. And we're not saying you should do any particular one. We are saying, and I'm just going to scroll down very quickly, let's see how big this document is. We'll scroll all the way down. Here we go, nearly all the way down. It's a large document. Number 10, so this is the only one that's in any kind of order, is using cash, and we're saying that that's generally the last resort option, and there's a number of reasons for that. Is that there's all kinds of risks of theft and fraud and accusations of theft and fraud around that. We understand that there's a risk of infection transmission by handling money. And people have a lack of confidence in dealing with cash particularly. So that's why we're saying that it's the last resort. We're not saying don't use it. If that's the option that works best for you, and you can put in systems in place that mean that you are confident about using it, then absolutely use it. But generally we would recommend that you look at some of the other options out there. There's a very large option up here, which we won't be able to show you all of it at the moment, around something called fiscal hosting. So there is an organisation called the Open Collective, running in conjunction with the Social Change Agency, and there is a link in this document to their website, and they basically host an online account for people. You don't need a bank account and you don't need a constitution, but there are safeguards that they've put in place, and it means that you can operate an online kind of money sharing opportunity, so that you can do transactions and pay expenses and things like that without handling cash. So that's something that you might want to go and have a look at. We will be updating this particular document with information around card machines, and we're just working on that at the moment, and we had some interesting discussions around that in the last couple of days. What we would say around transactions with money, so and I'm sure I'm teaching you to suck eggs at this point, but transactions involving someone else's money should be completely open and transparent. And if you do have to handle somebody's cash, please do ensure that you give them a receipt of some sort. Like I say, I'm absolutely certain that that is teaching you to suck eggs in some respect. So my apologies for that. There we go. Right, so let's go back to that. So really, in terms of handling money, we know that that's the thing that people are feeling the most anxious about and we definitely want to help you prevent theft and fraud and prevent accusations, and for people to have confidence in your community scheme. Okay, so again, I know it's a big issue, and I don't really have time to go into masses of detail of it, which is why we're handing out a handout. If there are things you want to particularly discuss with us, we're really happy to chat over options with groups. Okay. Oops. Again, sorry, I'm just battling with my technology. There we go. So the next one, next area to talk about is preventing infection. So obviously one of the key concerns is about stopping the spread of the coronavirus. And the government have given some really clear guidelines. There are some key restrictions in place. You should only leave your house for one of 4 reasons, and one of them is to provide care or to help a vulnerable person. So volunteering is still permitted, but that volunteering should be considered. Is the activity necessary? We shouldn't just be kind of going out several times a day and using volunteering as an excuse. It should be done in a way that is supporting people where it's essential. So people should be looking to minimise the time spent outside their homes, ensuring that they are a minimum of 2 metres apart from anyone outside. And this still applies if you're delivering food or prescriptions. So having kind of systems in place for your volunteers and making sure that they understand those systems and know how to implement them is really, really important. People shouldn't generally be going inside homes of other people, particularly those that they don't live with, and especially vulnerable people or people they believe may be infected and are isolating themselves. There shouldn't be no physical contact between volunteers and those in need. We suggest that goods are placed on the doorstep and people are notified that their delivery has arrived. Washing hands is obviously a theme at the moment, and volunteers should wash their hands before and after a delivery and a delivery session in general. Please remember the 20-second rule. So I'm not going to suggest a particular song for you to sing. There's already been plenty of hilarious options for that. But washing hands is a key. There's been some questions around the need for PPE, that's personal protective equipment. But current government guidelines is that for general volunteering, you shouldn't need PPE, personal protective equipment, and that hand washing should be sufficient. I know that there are groups who've taken a different view, and that's fine. Like I say, it's not our job to tell you what to do, but purely to give you support and guidance. Okay, so again, I'm just going to move on to the next one. So the next one is around working with volunteers. I really hope that the first point is blindingly obvious, that volunteering is voluntary. Anybody who is told they have to do volunteering, that's not volunteering. So it's really important that people working as volunteers are doing it because they want to. It does mean that people are much more compliant with systems, and it means that they're there for the right reasons. Government guidance says that you can only provide support to people who are in isolation as a volunteer if you fulfill all of the following conditions. So you are well, you have no symptoms like a cough or high temperature, and nobody in your household does. You're under 70 years old, you're not pregnant, and you do not have any long-term health conditions that make you vulnerable to coronavirus. So if any of your volunteers fall into any of those conditions, then you need to find a way for them to volunteer from their own home. They shouldn't be going out if they are over 70 years old and doing volunteering. And I know that cuts out a massive swathe of people who are willing to volunteer, but this is about protecting people as much as possible. All our volunteers are different from each other, and so it's really important that we understand people's abilities and what they can do in terms of volunteering, and not just have some sweeping kind of assumptions about volunteers in general. Again, I'm sure I'm teaching you to suck eggs about this, but what we do know about working with volunteers is the clearer you can be about a task and the boundaries involved in that task, then the more a volunteer feels confident about doing the task and is more likely to come back and do it again. And so that's really useful. A really big thank you to Beth Prince, who has put something on the chat about keeping your community and collectors safe around waste. So that she's put a nice little thing on the chat there, so we'll try and lift that and stick that onto our that link onto our COVID-19 page as well. Thank you for that, Beth. That's really grand. So yeah, so clear boundaries and tasks, really important. Gives your volunteers confidence in what they're doing, gives them confidence in you, and means that they'll come back and do it again. And again, saying thank you a lot, that again seems really obvious, but actually when we're working under a lot of pressure, we can forget to do it, or if we're doing a lot of things, we can forget to do it. And it goes a really, really long way. There's lots and lots of volunteer management studies that show that actually most volunteers don't want something tangible as a reward for doing their volunteering, but a thank you means the absolute world to them. So say thank you a lot to your volunteers. And relationship building is the fundamental part of volunteer management. So where you're running a scheme with dozens and dozens or hundreds and hundreds of volunteers, it's really hard to have relationships, which is why breaking those down into streets or neighborhoods or smaller areas and having somebody coordinate that can be really useful, and they can have a direct relationship with their volunteers, and you can really understand where people have got concerns, where issues are popping up, and get ahead of those kinds of things before they become a real problem. So relationships really matter when you're working with volunteers. Okay, so again, I'm going to move on. By the way, we do run training sessions on volunteer management, and they take a lot longer than 5 minutes. So, like I say, a real whistle-stop tour of stuff today. Data protection. I'm sure lots of you have heard the deathly acronym GDPR, General Data Protection Regulations. I'm not going to bore you about that. The link on here is on so that you can have it after the webinar. The information that I'm going to give you now comes directly from the Information Commissioner's Office, and is directly from this advice. And data protection rules do not stop you from helping people in need, although that might be the impression that some people have got in the past. Some groups might be handling sensitive personal information, so it's useful to kind of be aware of that if you are, and I'll just go through this in a moment. So generally, in terms of data protection, keep it clear. Be clear, open and honest with people about what you're doing with their personal information. Tell them why you need it and what you'll do with it and who you're going to share it with. It's best to have it written down if you can, and the ICO have got a template on their site. Like I say, the link is brilliant. It's really good piece of writing from the ICO. Keep sharing. In an emergency, working with partners and sharing information with them can make a real difference to public safety. In fact, it can be more harmful not to share data than to actually share it. For example, you might need to tell a local council about elderly residents who are housebound due to self-isolation and need support. So you can think ahead. What kind of information are you likely to share? What do you need to do to make sure that happens as securely as possible? Data protection law does not prevent you from sharing personal information where it's appropriate to do so. Keep it lawful. If you're not sure whether you should be handling personal data, think about whether it falls into one of the following categories. One, would the person expect me to use their information like this? Have they given me their clear consent? Is the person's health or safety at risk? If the answer to any of those questions is yes, then you can handle and share personal data. You should also take particular care if you're handling sensitive data, and that's slightly differently defined. So sensitive data is private information like health records, sexuality, race, ethnicity, and religion. So is anyone gathering this kind of data? Can you raise your hand? So the controls at the bottom of your screen, you should be able to raise your hand. If you're collecting sensitive data, can you raise your hand for me so I can see how many groups are doing that? So there's a few coming up actually. Yeah, right. So okay. Yeah, at the moment that's about 20% of people on here are okay. That's good to know. So it's a significant number of groups are probably collecting sensitive data. So if you're going to use sensitive data, you should ask them some further questions because the law requires you to look after it a bit more carefully. Do I need this information to protect a person at risk? Have they given me their consent? Would this information save somebody's life? If the answer to any of those three questions is yes, then you can handle and share that type of data too. But do make sure you're only doing what's necessary and appropriate for the task at hand. Like I say, data protection law does not stop you from helping those people in need. Okay, I'm going to lower all your hands. Thank you for that. Keep it secure. You must look after the personal data you collect. That means keeping it secure on a device or in a locked cabinet, for example. Security measures don't need to be so onerous that they prevent you carrying out your work. That's the really important thing here. Think about the impact on a vulnerable person if the information they entrusted you with becomes lost or stolen. Then try to apply measures to reasonably reduce the risk of that happening. Okay, I've only got two more things around data protection, so I know this is riveting kind of stuff, but it's really important. So the ICO asks you to keep it to a minimum. Only use and keep what you need to provide help to vulnerable people during this crisis. When the emergency is over, and we hope that that'll be sooner rather than later, make sure you and your volunteers securely delete or destroy any personal information that you no longer need. And finally, keep a record of what you've done. Finally, you should keep a record of any decisions you make that involve the use of personal information. Ideally, you should do this first, even before you start collecting information. But during the pandemic, that might not be possible. So they suggest that you keep notes of what you've done and why, and then make more detailed records when you can. Okay. So again, data protection, big area. If it's an area that you're not sure that you're doing the right kind of stuff, do come and talk to us about it, and we can help you with that. Yeah, sorry about this. There we go. So feeling overwhelmed. Straight after talking about data protection, feeling overwhelmed. It can be it's a real thing that we're starting to hear from communities and particularly from group organisers, that perhaps feeling like it's all getting a bit on top of people. Are you taking on too much as an individual? Can you involve other people? So can you find other volunteers, other agencies, local organisations to help you manage and organise the tasks that you find yourself doing? And do you need to offload a bit? Do you just need to kind of talk things through with somebody? Do you just need to have a bit of a complaint, get things off your chest a bit? So there's lots of things in terms of feeling overwhelmed. we can offer you some support directly about all kinds of things, lots of the topics that we've talked about today, but also about how you can recruit more people to help spread the load. We've got the Facebook group that I've talked about, we've got support from advisors, and we're also going to be running a listening ear service. We haven't launched it yet, but we will be soon. So that listening ear service is predominantly aimed at group coordinators, but if they've got volunteers that they'd like to refer into that as well, then we will be doing that. That'll generally be on an appointment basis, and it'll be on a one-to-one secure basis, and confidential too. So do keep an ear out for that coming. Okay. So we've got 10 minutes left of the webinar, and so I've got one more large area to talk about, and then we'll go into your questions. So I hope everybody's still okay so far. So I just wanted to talk to you about Corona Helpers. This is one of the other big ways that we are offering support to organisations. So I just want to show you, bear with me while I fiddle with this. So let's just get a quick poll. Who is using Corona Helpers already? Who's using Corona Helpers already out there? Okay, if you can't see the poll, if you could just bung in the chat a yes if you're using Corona Helpers. Okay, about 60% of you have voted on this at the moment. So if you've not heard of Corona Helpers, you're probably not using it, I would say. Oh, and somebody's put not sure. Okay, that's a good answer. Excellent. So, okay, I'm going to close the poll because it's just a yes or no answer. Let me show you. So by far, most of you are not using Corona Helpers, and that's absolutely fine. So let's just stop that. Let me show you Corona Helpers. So Corona Helpers is a website. Let's just go here and show you what it looks like. The idea of Corona Helpers, if you've not heard about it already, is that it's a way of linking people who want to volunteer in their local community with the groups that have emerged on the ground directly. And it's also a way of people who want help locally engaging directly with those organisations as well. It's a tool to help you. You're not obliged to use it, but we've got over 50 organisations already using it. And let me show you some of those just now. So can everybody see my screen? If somebody can just say yes in the chat, if they can see all the organisations. Yeah, brilliant, fabulous thing. Okay, so you can see here some of the organisations and the vacancies that are up there, and it's really quite varied about where they are. So we cover the whole of Somerset, and there's all kinds of stuff up on there. So you can see at the top of the page here is this organisations tab, and so if you are a local group, you can click this link here, and you can set up your own organisation on the website. You'll need to set up a personal account first, but it's all really quick and easy, I absolutely promise you. I want to go there and go. So this is the main page that you get to, and you can scroll down and you can see that you want people to offer help and they can request help. And it's just a little bit of a description about the kinds of things that people might be offering to do. So once you've become an organisation, you can register the opportunities that you want to do. So it's a really good thing to do is, like I say, have a look at some of the other opportunities other organisations have done already. It gives you a really good idea about what you can do for yourself. And as you get, once you've got hopefully it's all fairly obvious how to do it all. It's been designed to be really user friendly, and most of our users have got to grips with it really straightforwardly. So yes, we'll send out, that's a very good point, we'll send a link out with the email with the slides and handouts about this as well. So once you have got an opportunity, and you can see I've got a mock-up one here on the screen in front of you, so from Spark Somerset. So this is a mock organisation and a mock opportunity, and we created an opportunity called Become a Spark, and as we've got people signed up, it tells us all kinds of things. So we can see here that one person's been accepted to volunteer and one person is pending here. So if I click on this little drop down, you can see who those people are. And Amelia is somebody who works at Spark. Hi, Amelia. And I can change the status of her. She's been accepted, as you can see here, by the little accepted button. Oh no, she's pending, sorry, it's Steve who's been accepted. So I can change Amelia to be an accepted volunteer. I can send her a little message that says thank you so much, but I'm not going to, because Amelia knows I'm going to do this. So I'm just going to send her, oh, it tells me I have to, so I can just go, oops, I absolutely cannot type today, thanks for volunteering, and send her a badly spelled typed message. You'll be much better at it than I am. And then when you can see that has then updated. I've got 2 accepted applications. That does a couple of things for groups. So we know that groups haven't been necessarily doing that at the moment on Corona Helpers, but that does a couple of things for you. One, it stops you getting repeated email reminders to accept your volunteers, and 2, if you've got more than one person as an admin for your Corona Helpers account, you know which volunteers have been dealt with and which ones haven't been dealt with. So it's a really good tool to kind of keep up to date with where you're at with managing your volunteers and stuff like that. I just want to quickly show you what Yeovil are doing with their landing page. So bear with me while I just again move everything around. You can't see me moving stuff around, but I've got boxes open everywhere. So if I just show you Spark Somerset at the moment, we have, when you click on your name of your organisation, it then tells you can go to Corona Helpers page. And so if I click on that link, we can create a landing page for our stuff as an organisation. Now you can see here, Spark Somerset, we have been a little bit lax in this. We haven't created anything for our landing page. What it has done is it has taken the description we've given for us as an organisation, but we haven't filled in the rest of this page. And actually there's quite a few organisations that haven't done that, and that's probably because you're really busy actually, and that's an entirely good reason for not having done it. But I just want to show you what that can look like if you do it, by showing you what Yeovil have done with theirs. So what they've done with theirs is they've told people a little bit more about themselves. They've put in a direct way to communicate with them directly, because that helps them, and they want people to come directly to them. And then they kind of also, we're looking for people to sign up, and they're actually signposting people directly who are organisations, and that link there sends people straight to the create an organisation link. So that's really helpful. And then it lists their opportunities, so people can see it all in one go. So what we know about Yeovil is that they are giving people this page link, and you can see this at the top of the page here. It's quite a short link, they're using that directly in their social media and stuff like that, so that people come straight to this page and don't see the rest of Corona Helpers too easily. And you can use these links here, these social media links at the bottom of your landing page, to do exactly that too. So there's a good question in the chat. How on earth are they doing that across the whole of Yeovil? So what they're doing is that they are taking that in and then they're divvying that out on a more local level, is my understanding anyway. But again, do come into the Facebook closed group for group coordinators, and you can have this kind of discussions directly with groups. So one last thing I want to talk to you about Corona Helpers before we move on to something else, is I just want to show you here is something about forms on Corona Helpers. So you can click on, I'm not sure if everybody saw me do that. So down the side here on the left hand side, there's a bunch of things that you can click on if you're the admin person for your page. If you click on forms, you can then create a form. And some organisations are using forms already. They're quite flexible. I'm not going to go through the full ins and outs of it, but you can create a form, and it gives you lots of different ways to create forms, and you can use them for all kinds of things. So some groups are getting more details from their volunteers directly through using those forms. What I would say is that if you need help with Corona Helpers, just ask us. We're really happy to go through this with anybody. But actually, it's been designed to be extremely user friendly. So hopefully you don't have any questions, but if you do have some around Corona Helpers, then do let us know. So I now realise that it's an hour's up, so I'm just going to start answering questions. We had a couple of questions emailed in. So somebody asked us what the area most in demand and need, what's the most need out there, and the area that's hardest to respond to. That's a really tricky question to answer at the moment. Generally, the biggest issue that we're aware of at the moment that groups have is around handling money, as I said. But in terms of the area most in demand and what the need out there is, that's a changing thing, and I'm not sure that we have the answers to that in a moment. The other question that we had emailed in before the webinar: are there any gaps identified in the provision being made available that can be filled by town councils? So some groups are already working directly with their town councils, and some town councils are coordinating the activity. So some town councils are a partner and working alongside. So I think, personally, I think it'd be really great if local groups and town councils can work together. Like I say, in lots of areas they already are. So in terms of being aware of the gaps in provision, town councils can do that by working directly with the groups that are on the ground. So let me have a quick look at some of the other questions that we've got. So we've got ones around, we've got volunteers not on email. Do you have any suggestions for contacting them? That's always a tricky question. I think you're going to have to probably go with telephone at the moment. I think probably letter is going to be too slow, and I'm not sure what other means of communications there are for that at the moment. Yes, Spark now does cover Taunton and West Somerset. Yes, some people use WhatsApp very successfully, and actually WhatsApp is encrypted, so in terms of data protection it does quite a lot of security stuff already, so that's quite useful. So there's a question here around whether we should be using NHS volunteers or Corona volunteers or local informal volunteer organisations. So what I would say to that is that NHS volunteer responders and the local response to COVID-19 are different things. They're doing complementary things, well, they're doing very similar things, but they have a slightly different audience. So the NHS responders are primarily at the moment focused on those in shielding. The local community response is predominantly everybody else. So like I say, they kind of work side by side. And if people in communities want to vote for either or both, that's entirely up to them. And Corona Helpers is just a tool to kind of try and make things easier for people. If it doesn't work for you, don't use it. We're not going to be upset about that. Like I say, at the moment we've recruited over 600 people through it across Somerset, and we've got over 50 organisations using it. So in terms of other questions, let me just have a look at the Q&A. I'm aware that it's now 2:05, so if you do have to wander off, I do completely understand that, but I will try and answer anything else. So there's somebody said that they've got a problem letting people know about their service. Are there any recommendations about that? I think if you have issues around, is that a publicity issue? Is that you're not sure how to let people know about it? Again, I would come into the Facebook group and have a chat with some of the other groups about what they're doing around that, because again, there's lots of different ways that people have kind of let their communities know about what they're doing. So yeah, you know, not everybody's online, and particularly older people might not be online. So you know, how have other communities already looked at that issue? There's a question coming again about the people shielding. Should we be directing people shielding to register with the NHS for support? Yes, if they're not already, if they've not received a letter from the NHS, and they think they should be shielding, and they can register with the NHS. And again, I think the link to that is on our Covid-19 page. And once they registered for support, they will be contacted. And I think that over I think the figure I heard was over 90,000 people have already been contacted about that. That might be more than that, to be fair. Okay. Okay. So I've been asked a question about DBS. Did I say that volunteers need a DBS to pick up prescriptions? My understanding is that NHS volunteer responders are not being asked to go through a DBS check to pick up prescriptions, and that is done through a formal volunteering organisation. So your less formal ones are unlikely to need it too. I hope that answered that question. Right, I think the question here, we found that certain volunteers may not have DBS bar, but do have a reputation. We had one who appeared to groom older people by being helpful. We checked with other charity groups and decided not to use the volunteer. Absolutely. If somebody makes you feel uneasy about either their behaviour or their reputation, then check it out. And if in doubt, don't use them as a volunteer. Absolutely. Somebody said here that we've got a totally cashless system up and running and it's working seamlessly. The person who's put that, absolutely fantastic. If you want to share that in the Facebook group, how that's working, that would be really, really helpful. Thank you. So a couple of other comments is that some people have printed out leaflets and postcards and put them through letterboxes in villages. The postcard points directed to their Facebook group and a telephone line. So yeah, that depends on, you know, whether you're able to get those things printed out, whether you've got you can cover the costs to do those things. But yes, absolutely. So I've been asked about where do I send the slides to this? How do I get your email address? So to be able to sign up to this webinar, you had to give us your email address. So we should have your email address. We'll only be using it for that purpose, and we won't be using it to contact you regularly. Helps. A question here about what if the vulnerable person is not able to carry shopping into their home? That's a good question. I think if somebody is that vulnerable that they are not able to carry shopping into their home, so that means that they've got some disabilities or difficulties, then they are probably in the vulnerable category that should be referred to Somerset Direct. I would suggest that a local community response is not geared up to support people who are that vulnerable, and you should be referring those people to Somerset Direct, because they are geared up to support those kinds of people. I hope that's okay. Are there any insurance requirements, implications for volunteers or those who are organising them? That's a good question. The British Association of Insurers has said that anybody using their car for deliveries, such as prescriptions and shopping, does not need to phone their insurers and notify them and that they will be covered for that kind of activity. So for the COVID-19 response. So there are no additional insurance requirements for people using their own vehicle for those kinds of activities. We are aware that of at least one group who's asked us about public liability insurance. What I would say is that an insurance company will always be happy to sell you insurance. But what you should be thinking about before you buy insurance is what is the activity we're doing, what risks does it have, and how can we mitigate them. So insurance is one type of mitigation for a risk. It's not the only type. So you would need to make a decision about whether you think it's worth insuring your activities or not. If you're already working with an established organisation, such as a town council or another local charity, they may already have insurance that covers those kinds of activities, and it's worth checking that out. Okay, gosh, there's quite a lot of questions. Bear with me. Yeah, so somebody's asked, given we've been established for nearly 3 weeks and have made extensive use of Facebook and telephone helpline with dozens of volunteers signed up, is there a compelling reason to move to the Corona Helpers website? If you don't want to use it, don't use it, I would say. However, what I would say is that we don't know how long this situation will last, that we get more and more people using Corona Helpers each day, and that if you are not signed up on the website, then it's more tricky for people who have signed up via it to get hold of you. That doesn't mean that you have to use it exclusively. You can use it alongside things that you're using already. And like I say, if you decide it's not for you, then that's absolutely fine. Okay. Our biggest issues are capacity for shopping and pharmacy collection. Can Spark create links with big chains to try and create better systems? I think that's something that's under discussion. I don't know how easy that is for us to try and sort, but I think that's certainly something we can consider. So I'll take that back for us to talk about. Okay. Right, there's one here. Taunton doesn't have a town council. The main part of the town is completely unparished. Any ideas? Yeah, so Taunton is a bit different to everybody else, and I think we're already talking to some of the organisers in Taunton. So I think we'll get in touch with Taunton separately to have a chat about that. Okay. Somebody said, I've seen something about red, orange, green cards in windows to indicate need urgent help or need assistance. Any thoughts? I've conflicted thoughts about this, to be honest. I think it's really great that people are putting systems in place to kind of identify people's needs. What I personally worry about is identifying to the world at large that somebody might be vulnerable. Is there another way of getting that message out? If not, or if it's in a really small community where lots of people, where pretty much everybody knows each other already, then that may well be appropriate. So those are my thoughts. If applying for a grant and a group doesn't have a bank account, can we have grants paid via Spark? I think if you take a look at the handling money handout that's going to be coming to you very soon, the fiscal hosting option may well be a really good solution for you guys, and would mean that you've got online access to stuff. If that's not going to be appropriate, then we can have a chat. But I think the fiscal hosting stuff may actually really help you there. Oh, thank you. Somebody has responded about the Taunton issue. So that's Taunton Dean and West Somerset Council has responsibility for the Taunton area instead of Taunton Town Council. So working directly with those would be useful. Okay. Okay. Right, I think I've covered most of the questions. I know that I've missed a few because there are so many. Somebody said they did send a question in. They wondered if the demand in each area is similar. I think the general types of demand are similar. I'm not sure about the level of demand in each area is similar. I don't have data on that, I'm afraid, so I can't really help you with that. Okay, so we are now 15 minutes over the hour. My humble apologies for that. So I am going to close the webinar now. I just want to remind people that Spark is a source of support and guidance. The Facebook coordinators group is a really great place for people to learn from each other. We have got our COVID-19 webpage. We will be running webinars on more detailed topics, so please fill in the survey and let us know which ones would be useful for you, and we are providing direct support to groups. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for tolerating my first stumbling attempt at a webinar. I really hope you found it useful, and like I say, please complete that survey. So thanks very much, and I will hopefully talk to you all again soon. Thanks again. Bye.